Questions are being asked about how effective Israel's renowned Iron Dome is after Hezbollah penetrated the defence system, killing 4 Israeli soldiers. Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, Israel's defence system, known as the Iron Dome, has never been more important to the country. Over the past year, it has defended it against Hezbollah rockets and a huge missile attack from Iran. But how exactly does this costly Iron Dome system work? And as the tensions with Iran mount, how effective is it going to be?
It was Iran's most serious attack on Israel. 180 ballistic missiles launched into the country. Retaliation for the killing of Hezbollah leaders in Lebanon and Israel's atrocities in Gaza. Yet despite the scale of the attack, its impact was hugely reduced as Israel's Iron Dome intercepted most of the missiles. So how does the defence system work? It detects incoming rockets with a radar and calculates which ones are likely to fall on populated areas. It then fires missiles at these rockets while letting the others fall. The Israeli army claims that its Iron Dome destroys 90% of the rockets it targets. But this week it failed. Hezbollah successfully penetrated the system. A drone strike hit an army base in Binyamina, killing 4 Israeli soldiers and injuring more than 60 others.
We are managing the incident. We will study and investigate the incident and how a UAV infiltrates without alerts and strikes the base.
In response, the US has deployed one of its most advanced defence missile systems to Israel, along with around 100 ground troops, supporting Israel despite its ongoing crimes. Earlier this week in Gaza, the Israeli military carried out a deadly airstrike on tents at the Al-Aqsa hospital compound. Displaced Palestinians were burnt alive, killing 4 and wounding at least 40 civilians. As the conflict in the Middle East expands, Israel's renowned Iron Dome has shown it's fallible. Will US support help diffuse tensions in the region or escalate them?
Well, let's meet our guests. Joining me in Surrey in the United Kingdom is Martin Smith. He's a senior lecturer in defence and international affairs at the Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst. In Edinburgh, in Scotland, we have Stuart Crawford. He's a retired Lieutenant Colonel and defence analyst. And here with me in the studio is Mohamed Haidar. He's a Middle East affairs analyst. Gentlemen, you're all very welcome to Roundtable. Martin, I'll come to you first. Iron Dome, we were always under the impression that it was perfect, and it has become apparent in recent days that weapons, smaller drones can get through and cause huge problems.
Yes, there's no such thing as a perfect air defence. I think, to be fair, on the other hand, Iron Dome, which is actually just one part of the Israeli air defence network, it's the part that tends to generate the headlines because it's been the part that's been most involved in countering Hamas missile launches from Gaza and most of the missiles and other projectiles that Hezbollah has launched from Lebanon. But it's one part of what's known as a layered system, each designed to deal with missiles travelling at different trajectories, different speeds and different distances. It is one of the most certainly capable air defence systems in the world, and it's also, of course, battle tested. But its limitations, I think, at both the lower end, as we've seen recently with the successful Hezbollah drone strike on the Golani Brigade base in northern Israel, and also at the top end. And we've seen that Israel itself has requested basically supplemental help and assistance from the United States with the deployment of one of its so-called TARD batteries designed to assist it in countering a possible further ballistic missile attack from Iran. So it's capable, it's sophisticated, it's certainly better than most other states, including states in the Middle East have got, but it's not, as you suggest, Enda, a 100% foolproof and effective system, simply because no such thing has yet been invented.
Stuart, how worried do you think the Israeli military will be that Hezbollah were able to target their young soldiers in reportedly a canteen area and kill them and cause multiple injuries to others?
Well, it will be of serious concern, of course, that a weapons system has been able to penetrate their extremely sophisticated layered defense and cause that damage and cause those fatalities. I have the dubious honor of having been attacked by ballistic missiles myself before in 1991 in Riyadh, when we received 16 Scud missiles from Iraq during the course of the war. And at the time, we were told that the American Patriot anti-missile system had taken them all out, but it subsequently transpired that it had intercepted less than 20% of the incoming missiles. So that just reinforces the point that Martin made, is that no system is infallible. That having been said, things have moved on considerably since then, over the past, whatever it is, 30, 40 years. And I think the Israeli system, the layered defense with the Arrow missiles for long distance, and then David's Sling for the medium distance interceptions, and finally the Iron Dome itself, the proper Iron Dome, if you like, for the short-range missiles. I think it's very sophisticated indeed. And also bear in mind that it's probable that the Israeli Defense Force does not bother or doesn't try to intercept missiles which it knows are going to land in open territory or uninhabited pieces of their countryside. So they will be concerned, but I don't think they'll be over-concerned. And the fact that the Americans are bringing in or sending a battery of their terminal high altitude area defense missile system is indicative that there are one or two things that need to be propped up, but I don't think they'll be panicking yet.
Mohamed, can I ask, how have you felt as a Lebanese citizen seeing your towns and villages and your cities bombarded over the last few weeks?
Of course I'm upset, but I want the international law to be applied. I want those civilians to be protected. I'm not talking about the military. Military is a fair, I would say, always, if it is the military and it's a fair balance between, the fighters, that's fair enough. But a war against civilian, this is completely, a complicit, a genocide, and this is an international crime.
Martin, I'll come to you. Just tell me, Iron Dome, while Israel says it's 90% roughly successful, it's not a deterrent, is it? I mean, Hezbollah will keep firing rockets in the hope that they can overwhelm it.
I think it's part of a deterrent in the sense that Mr. Netanyahu and his government have been very clear about this. The objective of leaving aside Gaza for just a minute, if I may, the objective of the Israeli operation in Lebanon is not to destroy and eliminate Hezbollah. There's a realistic recognition that is desirable, though it may be from the Israeli point of view. It's not actually possible. Instead, what Israel is seeking to do is to, number one, degrade Hezbollah capabilities to the point that its leaders conclude that they are in danger of losing more than they could possibly gain by continuing to launch missiles and drones and other projectiles into Israel. So part of that equation is not just the, if you like, the offensive element, is seeking to locate and attack and destroy primarily Hezbollah missile launching facilities, and also going after key personnel within the Hezbollah chain of command as well. The other side of the coin is maintaining, again, not a perfect system, but relatively a sophisticated, battle tested and therefore significantly successful air defense system. So by itself, and again, we shouldn't overestimate what the Iron Dome and the associated air defense network can do for Israel. It can't keep all the missiles and projectiles out. We've seen that very clearly. It can't therefore be the totality of an Israeli defense effort, but I think it can be an important component part of this, if you like, double-headed Israeli deterrence effort, which on the one hand rests on the offensive capability of degrading Hezbollah to the point where its leaders conclude that continuing to attack Israel is not feasible. And the other side of that coin, and essential to that overall effort, is to maintain a relatively very capable, not invulnerable, but very capable and tested air defense network, which is what primarily Iron Dome in the Hezbollah context, but potentially the other layered elements, that's what they bring to the overall Israeli deterrence equation.
Stuart, Iron Dome was launched in 2011, but in the past 13 years, warfare has moved on. The arrival of these drones, how much of a game changer have they been then, do you think, for an organisation like Hezbollah, which previously really would not have been able to hurt Israel because of the Iron Dome?
Well, I think that the arrival of drones on the battlefield has been one of the more interesting developments over the past 20, 30 years. I've often said that the reason that they've had such an impact is that in many ways they've developed into what one might call a threat vacuum with no natural predators, if you like. That threat vacuum is now being filled up very quickly indeed. And drones, although they are ideal weapons for groups like Hezbollah and indeed for Hamas, they're slow and they're vulnerable, but they're inexpensive. And so you can suffer attrition on your drone assault and still one or two will get through. So they have made a big difference. But they're really quite vulnerable, actually, now that people have realized exactly what they can do and what they're capable of. And the last couple of defense equipment exhibitions I've been to have been full of defense industry new innovations in terms of tackling drones, either by hitting them directly or jamming them or spoofing them or interfering with their communication, controlling communications. So I think when it all settles down, there will be yet another weapon system which is available on the battlefield, but they're certainly not the sort of all-conquering and all-seeing devices that some people tend to portray them as. They're another weapon system, and that's about it. Not much more than that.
Mohamed, give us your impression of where the people of Lebanon sit at the moment. Obviously, Hezbollah is a political party, has its military wing, it has significant support. How are people in Lebanon feeling now after all of the devastation?
From the impression, I got from the people, from the comments, from the newspaper, from television interviews, with different people who are with Hezbollah and the resistance, or from people against. There are some kind of unity, but with vulnerability. This is the truth. Because, this is very painful for Lebanon, but this is not the first time. Lebanon hasn't, I said, look, there has been disasters like this in the 60s and atrocities committed by the Israelis against Lebanon. Because now the situation is really very difficult for civilians in Lebanon. Civilian institutions like Red Cross, like journalists, has been hit, indiscriminately, and the excuse has been used in Gaza. You realize that universities has been blown up, hospitals, churches, orphanage, every source of life, of continuity of people has been hit deliberately. And every time they say, oh, there was a military target. Show us this military target. Show us the battle so people can believe. So look, for Lebanon, yes, the society is very vulnerable and quite a lot of people that are trying, to invest in that situation, but there is a lot of support for this resistance. Why? Because this is the land of the Lebanese and they are defending their land. It doesn't matter. There are criticism for the resistance. There are criticism for Hezbollah. There are faults. Nobody can deny that. But the whole point for the Lebanese, they are doing this to protect their country.
Thank you, Mohamed. Martin, talk to me about the situation with the UN peacekeepers, drawn from many countries, including my own country of Ireland. We've had peacekeepers there for half a century without any problems. And in the past week, we've seen Israel threaten these peacekeepers. How, as a military man, do you feel seeing that happen?
I think, unfortunately, it's a symptom of the underlying problem, which Mohamed touched on briefly earlier, and that is that the Lebanese state is too weak and has been for a long time, for decades, to be able to effectively provide security, internal and external, of its own borders and over its own territory. So UNIFIL, the UN peacekeeping force you refer to there, Enda, is not new. It's been deployed, albeit at lower numbers historically, but it's been deployed since the aftermath of the first Israeli military incursion into Lebanon in 1978. In terms of its current status and situation, what it's supposed to be doing there, the root of the immediate problem is that UNIFIL's numbers were enhanced quite significantly at the conclusion of the 2006 conflict between Israel and Hezbollah, with the intention to solidify the ceasefire initially agreed between Israel and Hezbollah that brought to an end the active 2006 conflict. And one of the key provisions of that, which is what essentially Israel is now trying to enforce unilaterally, is that Hezbollah, in the first instance, would agree to withdraw its weapons and its fighters north of the Litani River, which is about 20 miles north of the Lebanese-Israel border. And the job of the UN peacekeepers was to monitor and to a certain extent to police that agreement. The problem in this sense is not with UN peacekeeping per se. The problem is that peacekeeping can only be effective if there is a peace to keep. And of course, there isn't a peace to keep between Israel and Hezbollah at the moment. But the root cause, there would be no need for UN peacekeeping force if the government and state of Lebanon was capable of effectively policing its own territory. So there are some pretty fundamental and long-term, deep-seated problems here. The current conflict between Israel and Hezbollah and the problems that UNIFIL has had and some of the aggressive actions which the IDF has reportedly taken against UNIFIL personnel, they are a symptom of the underlying problem. The underlying problem is the UN has been charged over the long term to keep a peace which at best has been very fragile, and from time to time, 1982, 2006, and now has broken down altogether. So they are, in that sense, if I can put it this way, they find themselves as being piggy in the middle of periodic violent confrontations.
Stuart, your thoughts on what Netanyahu has said to the UN peacekeepers? He basically wants them to vacate and to leave. And he's almost insinuated that they've been sheltering or helping Hezbollah fighters in that area, or that Hezbollah have been trying to utilize their positions there. Were you slightly surprised to see some of the language coming from the Israelis on this?
No, not at all. I've, in my time in uniform, served on UN operations in a peacekeeping role. And I have to say that my personal view was that it was the biggest waste of my time during my army career that could have been imagined. UNIFIL is pretty useless, to be perfectly honest about it. It's not doing anything. It hasn't affected anything. It's not robustly led. And I think Netanyahu's quite correct saying, look, just get out of the way. Because they're not doing anything. I wouldn't go as far as to say that they've been sheltering Hezbollah fighters. I don't think that we can prove that. But I don't think they've been very diligent in their job and what they're trying to do.
But do you not accept, Stuart, they have a right to be there? They have a right to be there. Whatever Netanyahu thinks, the UN has a right to keep its peacekeepers. Yes,
I'm not denying that they've got a right to be there because they've been put there by the United Nations, but they're useless. And they might as well not be there, to be perfectly honest, in my opinion. And so perhaps Netanyahu is telling them to get out of the way in case they might get hurt. And indeed, some of them have been injured in circumstances which are not at all clear. The problem is that Israel does have to defend its territory and its people from Hezbollah and Hamas, who are lobbing rockets at them and have been for some considerable time. And for peace to break out, it needs the terrorist groups to stop lobbing missiles and drones at Israel and for the Israeli forces to withdraw into their own territory.
I want to bring Mohamed
Which
in here,
comes
Stuart.
first.
Just bear with me, Stuart.
Sorry?
I want to bring Mohamed in. Mohamed, your thoughts on Netanyahu telling the UN
I'll tell you,
peacekeepers to go?
There are several points,
Yeah.
First of all, I don't think, Netanyahu, he cares about the United Nations. Before, in Lebanon, he hit 2 compounds for the United Nations where, refugees were resided there with the United Nations. And they know that. Qana 1 and Qana 2, it is known internationally, it's a massacre. People were, taking shelter with the United Nations, and the Israeli, bombard that one. Are you telling me he cares about them? Of course not. This narrative, it's really a bit tricky, and an intelligent person cannot accept that. Right. Something else as well about the protection and deterrent, of Israel. Why the question? Why the the USA are bringing THAAD system to Israel now?
Extra protection?
Because it's vulnerable. There's no deterrent. But the question is, what's going to happen, after that? And who is really, mouth-watering, for seeing the THAAD there? The Russians. The Russians are going to test this American protection system in Israel. What if this failed? What that means, for the USA, that will be a big failure. All the system, they introduced to Ukraine by the USA has failed, and did not, wasn't be able to protect the Ukrainian against the Russian. So if you bring it now, I think, the story will repeat itself.
Martin, what happens when Iran gets drawn into all of this? I mean, will the Iron Dome stand up to Iranian missiles?
Well, I think this is the concern. The Iron Dome element of the Israeli defense network is not designed to stand up to the kinds of long-range ballistic missiles that Iran is most likely to launch. It has launched twice previously and is therefore most likely to launch again in any further attacks on Israel. We're looking at the top end in that sense of the system, which, as I think Stuart indicated earlier, is the so-called Arrow, the Arrow 2 and Arrow 3 missile interceptors. And I think clearly the Israeli government perceives a potential vulnerability there, which is why it's requested support and assistance from its American ally in the form of the deployment of one of its THAAD batteries. So we don't know. We can never predict what's going to happen and the extent to which the system might be overwhelmed and what the implications and consequences of that would be for Israeli civilians, apart from anything else. But I think it's apparent that the Israeli government senses that if there was a major exchange with Iran, and if Iran launched another significant ballistic missile attack and tried to saturate or swarm elements of the Israeli air defense capability, then there is a significant prospect of enough missiles getting through to do quite significant damage, not just to Israeli military facilities, but to civilian targets in Israel as well. So again, I think this brings us back to where we started, Enda. For all its sophistication and for all its capability, and yes, the Israeli air defense system, is relatively sophisticated and is relatively capable. But in a time of heightened tension and active military conflict, there are also some pretty significant gaps and vulnerabilities there as well. And no system, technological system, can ever be 100% invulnerable. And the Israeli government and its American allies clearly recognize that.
Stuart, final question to you. What impact do you think this THAAD system will have then when the Israelis bring it in? I hear it takes 100 US military personnel to actually operate it, so they will be on Israeli soil in person.
Yes, absolutely, and I think that it's something like 96 missiles or something in the battery. I'm not exactly sure, but the figures being bandied around suggest 100 US personnel will be accompanying the battery of missiles and indeed operating them. So in many ways, if Iran does launch another barrage of ballistic missiles at Israel, then the US is directly involved. And the TAD system is bolstering up the Israeli Arrow missile system and the David Sling. And who wouldn't want something else to assist in that sort of defensive role? My personal suspicion is that when Israel does retaliate against Iran for the last attack, its focus will be on denying the Iranians the ability to retaliate yet again, if you like, by using ballistic missiles. So the Israeli assault on Iran will concentrate mainly on military facilities and not on the nuclear facilities or indeed the oil and gas facilities on this occasion. So I think that we're talking about the Israelis degrading Iran's ability to attack them again. And then if there's another attack, the US will be involved. And indeed, the US is already involved with its two Aegis anti-aircraft destroyers, which are in the Eastern Mediterranean, which were utilized the last time to shoot down ballistic missiles. So we're just going to see more of the same.
Stuart, Martin and Mohamed here with me in the studio. Thank you all so much. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Search for Roundtable TRT World. And if you like what you see there, please do hit that subscribe button. But for now, from me, Enda Brady, and all of the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.